We are going to talk about factors that affect diffusion. So, we define diffusion as the movement of particles from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. We discussed that there is a gradient that results from the differences in concentration between both sides of a membrane, the inside of the cell and the outside of the cell, and the diffusion is the movement of these particles down the concentration gradient, which means from region of high concentration to regions of low concentration. So the first factor affecting diffusion is the concentration of molecules. This is an animal cell, and we see the cell membrane with its pores. This is the outside of the cell, and here we have certain molecules. Let's say that these molecules are at a 5% concentration on the outside of the cell, in the medium that the cell is in. And they are not present inside the cell. So these molecules will diffuse into the cell through the membrane because they are more concentrated on the outside than they are on the inside. And if they are more concentrated on the inside, then of course they will leave. But the important thing is that they will move from high concentration medium to low concentration medium. Now let's take another animal cell. And this time, let's say that the same molecules are outside of the cell, but this time they are at a higher concentration. Let's say this time they are at 10% concentration outside of the cell. Now, of course, these are going to diffuse into the cell because they are higher in concentration on the outside than they are on the inside. We previously explained that particles use kinetic energy, which is the energy of their motion, to diffuse through a membrane. So these 5% are using their kinetic energy to diffuse to the inside of the cell, while these 10% are using also their kinetic energy to diffuse to the inside of the cell. However, since these 10% are obviously more than the 5%, there are more particles here, so there is more kinetic energy, because each particle now has kinetic energy and there are more particles. Then that means there will be more diffusion into the cell than in the other case where there is only 5%. The concentration of the molecules increases from 5% to 10%. So the kinetic energy will increase because there are more molecules now that have kinetic energy. And so the diffusion will increase. The diffusion in the second cell of the same substance is more than the diffusion in the first cell because there is a higher concentration in the second cell. Now, the second factor is temperature. Temperature is the average kinetic energy. So when the temperature increases, the average kinetic energy will increase, and as we said, with more kinetic energy, diffusion into a lower concentration medium will increase. So when we increase the temperature, diffusion will increase from high concentration medium to low concentration medium. The third factor is the surface area. Let's assume that we have this cell. This is the cell membrane, and let's say that the volume of this cell is 1 unit. These are the substances that will diffuse into the cell because they are concentrated on the outside more than on the inside. Let's assume we have this other cell. It has the same volume of 1 unit, but the difference is that it has a folded membrane. This cell has a surface area of 2 units, and this other cell has a surface area of 4 units, because these folds increase the surface area. They make the membrane longer. Let's say we have the same concentration of substances on the outside of both cells, and both cells have the same volume. So the difference here is in the surface area. In the second cell, we will find that the diffusion is higher than in the first cell because we have an increased surface area. This will lead to increased diffusion simply because the materials have more space to enter and to exit. It's like they have more doors to use, so they will be able to use the doors without having traffic or without having obstacles. An important thing here is to notice that there is a ratio that will cause this increase in diffusion. The ratio of surface area to volume, which is surface area divided by volume in the first cell, is 2. It's 2 divided by 1. Whereas in the second cell, it is 4, because it's 4 divided by 1. If the ratio of surface area to volume is greater, then the diffusion will be greater. And this ends our 3 factors that influence diffusion: concentration, temperature, and surface area.